Welcome to Naresh Technologies. I'm Bangar Raju, and in this video, I wanted to demonstrate what is an exception and exception handling. Exceptions and exception handling. First, let me give you a clear picture. What is an exception? And later we'll discuss on exception handling programmatically. Okay, first let us understand what is an exception. What is an exception? Let's first clarify this out. See, generally a very common answer where most of the people say exception is a runtime error. Exception is a runtime error, but not exactly exception is a runtime error. But let us just try to understand very clearly what is the exception. See, whenever we are developing an application, in the application we'll be coming across two different types of errors. First one, compile time errors, and second one, runtime errors. The two different types of errors are compile time and runtime. What is a compile time error? An error that occurs in your program due to syntactical mistakes is what we call as a compile time error. You're writing a program, you've forgotten to end a statement with a semicolon. Strings are not enclosed in double quotes. Curly braces not properly closed. All these things comes for you under the syntactical mistakes, and we call them as compile time errors. And remember, these errors are never dangerous. Why they are not dangerous? Because after writing the program, we compile the code. When you're compiling the code, the compiler recognizes what are the errors in this. And once the compiler recognizes what are the errors, it will show you the list of errors and you'll fix. Nothing happens here. If you are going to execute this, if you are going to just check out this correctly, no problem is there if you get a compile time error. Why? We are not still running the code. We are only in the compilation stage, development stage. So that is the reason why compile time errors are not dangerous and we don't require to take them seriously at all. Second, runtime errors. What are runtime errors? These are errors that occur in your code due to various reasons, but not at the time of compilation, it is at the time of execution. So these are errors that come into picture while the execution of a program is going on, is what we call as a runtime error. Means you're running of the code now. When you're running of the code, error will come for you, and that is what we call as a runtime error. But why do we get runtime error? Lots of reasons are there why to get runtime errors. Runtime errors can occur for you in your code due to various reasons, like wrong implementation of logic. Wrong implementation of logic. Okay, next, wrong inputs supplied. Wrong inputs supplied. Missing required resources. Like this, there are various reasons why runtime errors are going to occur for you inside your particular code. Not like one particular reason, n number of reasons are there why runtime errors will occur. The first important thing is wrong implementation of logic. What is that wrong implementation of logic? Remember, see, suppose I'm going to have an array in my code and the array has 5 values in it. Now I want to print the values of the array by using a for loop, and I'm going to write a for loop that executes for 6 times. When I write a for loop that executes for 6 times, automatically error will come in your code. Why? Because C# has array bound checking. What is that array bound checking? You cannot go beyond the size of the array. If at all the loop is going to execute for 6 times, what is the problem? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values are printed. Now loop runs for the 6th time, but 6th item is not in the array. Because there is no 6th item in the array, you get an error. This is a simple example to understand wrong implementation of logic. And remember a point, compiler will never check the logic. Compiler will never check the logic. The reason why compiler will never check the logic is, generally, if you just understand you can write a program logic in different ways. Compiler checks only syntaxes because syntax means a particular format. Everyone has to follow it. You cannot change. But logic means there is no particular format. Everyone can write logic in different ways. Because logic can be implemented in different ways, compiler will never check the logic. What the compiler checks is only for syntaxes. So syntaxes errors are identified by compiler but not logical errors. So what happens now? Compiler will directly take your code now and tries to run, and in the runtime error will come. See, suppose if this is your array, int ARR is equals to a simple array like this. Now I am writing for int I is equals to 0, I less than or equal to ARR dot length I plus plus console dot write line I. And after ending the loop, here I am again writing console dot write line end of program. End of program. This is what I am writing. A very simple code what I am just using here. Now, if you just understand the things now, when you are trying to write the thing like this, what is the problem you have is, see, how many items are there in the array? 5. But here you are telling what? Int I is equals to 0, I less than or equal to ARR dot length. Less than or equal to ARR dot length means 0 to 5 now. 0 to 5 means loop executes for 6 times. So now it will execute the code now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 are printed off. Now the loop will run for the 6th time. When the loop is going to run for the 6th time, error will come. So that's what? Wrong implementation of logic. Second, wrong input supplied. What is the wrong input supplied? Very simple. I am writing a simple program asking the user to enter an integer value. Okay. So a console application asking the user to enter integer value. I prompted him, enter an integer value. But unfortunately, user did not enter me an integer value. User entered a character value, boolean value, string value, double value. He may enter any value now. So if he enters any wrong value like this, what happens? Error will occur now also. That's what wrong input supplied to the program also will lead you to runtime error. Okay, that is the second reason. Missing required resources. What is missing required resources? Say, I was trying to write a program to open a file on the hard disk and read the content from it. When I write the particular program, okay, the file was existing, everything is fine, I was able to execute the fun. Now, after 1 week, what happened? I'm trying to run the same program, chances of getting an error. Why? Unfortunately or unknowingly, someone deleted the file. When someone deleted the file, now my program will try to access the file, not existing. Okay, so this is another reason. Not only this, you are trying to access a database present on a remote system. There is a network problem now in your organization and the network is not working, or the server is shut down there. So like this, number of issues are there why runtime errors will come for you in your code. There is no particular one reason why runtime error will come. Runtime errors can come into picture due to various reasons like this. These are only few. Still so many are there like this to understand why runtime errors are going to come into picture. So all these things comes for you under which category? Runtime errors. Now, are these dangerous? The question is, are these dangerous? Yes, these are dangerous. Why these are dangerous? Because whenever a runtime error occurs in your code, the program terminates abnormally on the same line where the error got occurred without executing the next lines of code. What exactly I mean to tell you? See, I have a program of 1000 lines. I got an error on line number 100. When I get an error on line number 100, the remaining 900 lines of code will not execute. Why? Because on line number 100, there is a problem there, and because of that particular problem, runtime error occurred, and because of this runtime error, abnormal termination was caused, and the remaining 900 lines of code are not executing. So it is dangerous. See, suppose I am developing an application to transfer the funds from one account to another account. Okay, so this is an application I am developing. The amount should be transferred from source account to destination account. See, internally there will be two update statements. First update statement to deduct the amount from the source account. Second update statement to add the amount to the destination account. So now two update statement has to execute. First update statement executed, money was deducted. What happened now, before executing the second statement, some error got occurred. The second statement did not execute now. Still it did not execute. I got an error. And because of this error, abnormal termination occurred. And because of this abnormal termination, the second update statement did not execute and the money is not added to the destination. So what will happen? The amount is lost in the source now. If you are the customer and you are trying to transfer some 50,000 rupees from your account to your friend's account, and the first update statement executed, money deducted and was not added to second account, will you leave it? Will you just finally leave this and go home and sleep now? Relaxed? No, not at all. What you do? You immediately call the call center, ask him what happened. Or otherwise, you'll just try to go to the nearest branch, ask him what happens, and you start fighting with the bank now. Why? You lost your money. It's not 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 50,000 you're trying to transfer. Money is not the matter, but you lose something there, automatically you start fighting with the bank. Why is this going to happen? Okay, so that is what. So runtime errors are dangerous. They are very dangerous. Why? Because they are going to cause abnormal termination. Wherever error occurs, abnormal termination, rest of the code will not execute. Now, the point we need to understand here is, who is responsible for that abnormal termination? Okay, runtime error occurred, program is abnormally terminating, but who is responsible for the abnormal termination? That is one important thing what we are required to learn here. Okay, let me explain you. Who is responsible for the abnormal termination? Okay, who is responsible? Okay, now let me explain you. Who is responsible for that abnormal termination whenever runtime errors are occurring for you inside the code? Listen, whenever a runtime error is occurring in your code, who is responsible for the abnormal termination means these exceptions are responsible. These exceptions are responsible. What is this exception? An exception is basically, just to understand, it is one class. It is a class. The exception is going to be a class. And what is this class going to do? Whenever a runtime error occurs in the code, immediately these exception classes will come into picture for abnormally terminating your program. So exception is not a runtime error. Runtime error occurred in my code. When the runtime error is occurring in the code, these exceptions are responsible for abnormal termination of the program. And these exceptions are nothing but classes. These are classes. Why I'm using the word classes here is, it's not like one class. Then how many classes? Representing every different error that comes in my code, there is a different class that is available for me. See, suppose in our earlier program I showed you, what is it? You're just trying to print the values more than the number of values in the array. Means the loop executes for more times than the number of values in the array. I'll get an error. What is that? Index out of bounds exception. So what is this index out of bounds exception? It is the name of a class. It is the name of a class that comes into picture when you go beyond the size of an array to abnormally terminate the program. Okay, next, divide by 0 exception. divide by 0 exception. Understand this. What is this? In our school days, we learnt in mathematics, what is that? A number can never be divided by 0. If you try to divide a number by 0, that's invalid. So, in our computer also, you can never divide a number by 0. Okay, computer also know this. I'm sorry, in our application, we can never divide by 0. The computer knows that. So, when you're trying to divide a number by 0, immediately this class will come into picture for causing the abnormal termination. Okay, see, there is an error called as exception called as overflow exception. What is this? What is the size of an int? Minus 2 power 31 to 2 power 31 minus 1. Minus 2 power 31 to 2 power 31 minus 1 is the range of int. Suppose if at all you are trying to give a bigger value than the capacity or the range of int, you will get this. Means a value exceeding the size limit will give you overflow exception. Next, format exception. When will this come into picture? Invalid type conversion. You have a double value and want to convert into integer. You have a string value, want to convert into float. That is what? Format exception. Okay, and like this, there are so many classes available for you in our base class libraries, and these classes are responsible for abnormal termination of the program whenever a runtime error occurs inside the program. So, runtime error is occurring, then these classes will automatically come into picture to terminate the program abnormally. So, what happens exactly internally, I will tell you. Okay, but these classes are responsible. Hundreds of classes are like that. I given you only a few examples now, but there are so many classes which are present here, which will be responsible for the abnormal termination whenever runtime errors are occurring inside the code. Okay, fine. Now, we have to understand a point here. Why these many number of classes? Abnormal termination. Why do you require these many number of classes? Because whenever a runtime error occurs in the code, the first thing what happens is abnormal termination. And immediately it will display an error message describing about the error. It will display an error message describing about the error. See, why exactly the abnormal termination occurred? You are trying to divide a number by 0 or you want to perform an invalid type conversion. What is the problem? So that has to be intimated to you. So that's why it will give you some error message give you. An error message is given to you in this process. Because it is going to give you an error message in this process, a different error message has to come in different scenarios, not the same error message always. A different error message should come in different scenarios, not one error message every time. That is the reason why representing each and every error, one class has been defined. This class will display you an error message about array index out of bounds. This class will display you an error message about divide by 0. This class will display you an error message about overflow, and this class is going to display you an error message describing about the format, that is invalid type conversion. So the point to note here is various exception classes are there, and all these classes are responsible for abnormal termination. Let me also give you a clear picture how these classes are implemented in our libraries, because all are predefined classes. Predefined classes means present in our libraries. How are they implemented? Let me tell you. A class with the name exception was defined. And in this class, they have written all the logic for abnormal termination. All the logic for abnormal termination was written now. And also, this class contains a read-only property to display an error message. Display an error message. The first thing is it contains the logic for abnormal termination. Second thing is it contains a read-only property to display an error message. and very important is this is virtual actually. Okay, a read-only property to display an error message, okay, which is declared as virtual. So declared as virtual in the sense, what is the meaning? Child class can override now. The child class can override this particular property now. Okay, this is how they defined a class called first. A class called as exception first, and under this class what is present? Logic for abnormal termination, and also contains a read-only property to display an error message which is declared as virtual, and the property name is message only, and the property name is going to be message. Message is the name of the property. Okay, so this property is a read-only property, read-only virtual property present inside of the class exception, which gives a chance for child classes to override. So this is the first thing what they done. Next, what is the next thing? Under this, two classes are defined. Application exception, and second one is system exception. Application and system exception are the two classes. So now understand, these are the two child classes. Because these are two child classes, they will derive all the contents of the parent class into it. The two classes are application exception, system exception. What is an application exception? What is a system exception? Application exceptions are non-fatal errors and system exceptions are fatal errors. Basically, what is a non-fatal error, fatal error in the sense? Fatal errors means these type of actions should never be performed, so the system will not allow you to perform. Application exceptions means these are basically we can perform these type of actions, but we don't want to perform this. A simple example, say we can never divide a number by 0. It's a universal rule. So everyone has to follow this rule, and it is not specially for you and me. So if you just notice this one, whenever we are trying to divide a number by 0, automatically an exception occurs, and that is a system exception. And see who is going to be responsible for this? This automatically within the application that happens, means our programs are going to execute under the CLR, and that CLR will just take the responsibility for this system exceptions. If it identifies a problem, immediately system exceptions will come. That's what system exception is. Second category, application exception. What is the application exception? Say, the same division, let us understand. Dividing a number by 0 is invalid, universal rule. But in my application, I have a requirement. I don't want a number to be divided by an odd number. The divisor should not be an odd number. This is not a universal rule. This is a specifically for my application. And because this is specific to my application, understand, CLR is not responsible for abnormal termination in this case, and I want to terminate the program abnormally if the divisor is an odd number. In such scenarios, we go for the concept called as application exceptions. Means these exceptions are not going to be caused by the CLR. These are exceptions caused by CLR. These are exceptions caused by programmers directly. Means we only will do it. CLR won't do. Here CLR will do. That's what. And now under this system exception, we have all the classes what we have discussed earlier. What is it? Index, out of bounds exception. See, these are all class names, so don't forget they should be in proper case. Next, format exception. And next you have arithmetic exception, and under this arithmetic exception we have divide by 0 exception, overflow exception. All these things comes for you in this hierarchy. So there is only some few classes to understand the concept, but there are so many classes here. But don't forget, The parent class is always exception. And in this class, you have the logic for abnormal termination inherited to all the child classes. Second thing is, they contain a read-only property. What is the property? Message. And this is a virtual property. Because it is virtual property, all the child classes can override the property. Remember, this property is overridden under all these child classes. Index out of bounds exception is overriding the property and defining an error message according to its requirement. Format exception is overriding the property and defining the error message according to its requirement. The same way, divide by zero is also doing the same thing. Overflow exception is also doing the same thing. So all of these classes will override the message property according to their requirement. So this is what the information for you about exception. So remember, exception is not a runtime error. Exception is a class responsible for abnormal termination of a program whenever a runtime error occurs inside the program. And a class means not one class. There are so many classes starting with exception class. Hundreds of classes are present, but two categorizations: application exceptions, system exception. First I'll demonstrate system exception, then I will tell you what is this application exception. So whatever we are coming across right now here are all going to be system exceptions. Thank you for watching the video. For more videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Naresh IT.